Welcome to the Truvantis Risk Radar. Well, hey, thank you guys for being here, and congratulations on the book. I think it's fantastic. What I like about it is I know that you've written it for PCI practitioners, but for an outside person that at least has a background in security and knows a little bit about PCI, it is a great read. And I tell you what makes it good is it's not just the theoretical. You don't just list the requirements, but it's very nice that you do give all the paperwork that companies need for their QSAs. But it's the real world experience, the unbiased advice, the pitfalls, the analogies that you write about really make it a great read for anyone that's interested in the topic. So I can personally highly recommend it. Why don't we start by a little bit of a roundtable? And Ben, if I got this right, you're kind of the founder of the band here, if you would. So why don't you go ahead and start off? Tell us about yourself and how you got this team together.
Yes, I guess I'm the alpha and these guys are the omega or whatever. Yeah, so I was at a QSA firm, Netitude, for a number of years, and at the time, one thing I found is that as standards, regulations, all these things, a lot of them are quite vague. PCI is quite descriptive, but even with all the details PCI has, clients still had a lot of questions, and so the council does a good job of creating facts, but there's still a lot of questions out there. So I thought of doing a webinar, and I got Coop, David, and a gentleman, Jim Seaman, who I worked with at Netitude, and we started these webinars, and we called ourselves the PCI Dream Team. Seaman left the organization, and we had a vacancy, and I didn't know Jeff at the time, but everyone said he's the man to speak, so we added him to the Dream Team. And it was really, we created these webinars, and then David and I had written some articles, and just try to give service providers, merchants, that extra mile of information for good quality, unbiased, vendor agnostic information. And that's how the Dream Team, came about. And then a while back, one thing I saw also is, clients would often ask is like, what documents, what do we really need? What is the evidence? And so we, that sort of was, one of the drivers to write this book, is that, here's the specs of what you need to do. Here's advice. Here's real world info from the field. And here's the specific pieces of evidence you can give your QSA. And so by, knowing that in advance, it could make it easier for everyone. And so that's sort of a quick overview of how the Dream Team came about. So we're thinking, Broadway show, turn it into a musical.
That'd be a great idea.
Yeah. But yeah, that didn't go far, that didn't go so well. But yeah, just keep on doing webinars. I mean, maybe sometime is, think about the second edition of the book. It's just out, I'm like everything, there might be some errors we made, there's in a next edition, by that time we'd come to that, have some, a lot more real world, version 4 experience, add to that. And, but yeah, just, I said, this is sort of a side gig, all of us do to, help the community. So, anything, just as it is, make it better, and, make it keep improving it.
So everybody calls me Coop. I don't think anyone in the PCI community even knows my name sometimes, but other than Coop. But I've been involved in this since the beginning. I was actually working 20 years ago. I was working down at Home Depot, little over 20, about 23 years or 21 years ago. Yeah. And
That was in the lumber department?
I had an apron and everything. And actually, we did. All of us at corporate had aprons, and when you get your flare, you had to have pieces of flare. So on apron day, we'd all wear them and look like a bunch of idiots. But the thing that happened is we had gone through a visa, a CISP audit, and I saw. Or that was coming around the bend, and I saw the opportunity there. So I when I left Home Depot, I got involved with some of that stuff, and Jeff and I were up at Foster City and went through some of that original visa training. They called us QDSPs, Qualified Data Security Professionals, and that's kind of how it started. And then Troy and Bob Russo, they were very instrumental in pushing the council.
Troy Leach, for those.
Troy Leach and Bob Russo, and they were pretty instrumental in get it going. I really didn't think it was going to work because you had 5 competitors. You had Visa, MasterCard, Discover, Amex, and JCB, and they were all competitors, and I didn't see how they were going to follow the same set of rules. And Visa was pretty strident in front of everybody with their CISP program. And then MasterCard had their SDP stuff, and Amex had their stuff, and JCB, so on and so forth. But anyway, I got involved right off day one and went to the first QSA classes, and then when PAQSA came around, I went to the first classes there in Boston after the one they did on the West Coast. Hap Hune taught it. He was a Visa guy, great guy. And so I've been involved in it day one, and then I actually worked for the council for a while, and I actually wrote the original P2PE training with a lot of help from others. Thanks, Andrew. And Andrew Jameson, he knows who he is. He helped a lot. And but the thing is, for 3 years I trained all the QSAs, ISAs, and so I've had my fingers in this, and I probably could leave and just. I've had so many opportunities, to go to higher levels, and that's what's happened my whole career. You do well, and they just keep wanting to shove you up, and I have stayed here purposely. And the reason I've stayed down here in this trench, known as being a QSA, is I can see where it has impact. I mean, I can't give you a litany or a list of the clients that I've helped over the years, but I can tell you right now. It's a good feeling because I've helped so many Fortune 500 companies, banks, you name it, get their stuff squared away. Because I've walked in the door and just seen, as all 4 of us have, just horrible things. We walk through the door and it's like, oh, Lord, how have you not been breached? How have you been able to stay above the fray? And that's why I stay here. And the book idea, I'm trying to remember, Ben, I think you tossed it around first. Ben's great. He keeps us all, he's the overseer of this, or the enabler. And he came up with the idea, and people have been giving me such excellent feedback on the book. And then the council, they just released this INFI worksheet the other day, and I'm thinking that definitely has to go in the next edition, because there's a couple things in there that are going to change the world, I think, a little bit for QSAs and for the merchants on the other side. And so that's the beauty of this too. By staying here, I'm an older fella. Jeff and I were older fellas. We could retire. Dave's an older fella. We could all retire. Ben's the youngster of the group. But why would you want to do that when you can stay here, have some impact? And at the same time, things are always changing. Either the council comes out with something new, the brands do, or something happens at a merchant. It just changes the world for everybody, and I'm just glad to be a part of it and to try to keep my clients out of trouble and keep them in order and in line with the requirements and get them through the compliance part of things. And then along the way, if we're lucky enough to also make them secure, then good, because compliance and security are very different things. Being compliant means you're at the base level. You're doing the basic stuff, and PCI is not a panacea that fix all ills or fixes all ills, and that's something that we can all talk about. But yeah, I'm just really happy to be here And with these guys are great. And I've learned so much from these three. You can't imagine the stuff that I've learned from them, and learned from my clients, learned something new today from a client. And so I love it. I'm going to keep doing it as long as they'll let me.
So my name is David Munhank. I'm a principal security consultant for eDelta Consulting. They're based in New York. I've been doing cybersecurity consulting work and worked pretty much in every paradigm you can imagine for almost 30 years now. And I first encountered payment card security stuff when I was working for Bearing Point, supporting the state of Texas website, and they were at e-commerce capabilities there. And so I think that was around version 1.1 of the standard. And so myself and another colleague, we were the OPSEC guys who had to do all the auditing and collect the logs and, and check tripwire and all that kind of stuff. And my other colleague left to join IBM, which had just been, actually joined ISS, Internet Security Systems. And right after that, IBM bought them, and he was trying to raise a family, and he didn't want to be on the road all the time. So he asked me if I wanted to take his position at IBM. It was very fortuitous because that's kind of when my career really took off. And so I went to IBM. I basically joined their QSA practice in the first engagements I did. One of the first engagements I did was I was on site, and that's where I ran into Ben. And we were working with we'll just call him a very cantankerous client, because they were not very close to being compliant, and they wanted to basically try to achieve compliance about litigation and our arguments and stuff. But anyway, I had known Ben previously because we both worked at GTE BBN. I never met him, but I think I recall seeing some of his emails. So anyway, he was working on this project as well, and so we went and had lunch together. And I knew at the time Ben had already published at least, I think, a couple of textbooks on cybersecurity, and he was already doing blogs and stuff. And I sort of begged him at lunch. I even paid for lunch too, because I thought that would help. I sort of begged him to say, "Hey man, I'd kind of like to break into doing some writing. I don't know how you did it, but maybe you can help me learn how to, find my way in and give me some tips and tricks." And he goes, "Oh, I can do much better than that." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, we're going to write an article together." And that's about 2007, I think. And so we wrote the first article together on PCI scoping, which was, at the time, seemed to be the thorn in everyone's side. So
Still is.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So after that, I was working my way up through the QSA ranks at IBM, and I also went to the Visa security training as well that Coop mentioned previously, and as well as being a QSA. And then I became a PA QSA, and we started a PA QSA practice, and I led that practice for about 6.5 years. And we had some, being IBM, we had QSAs all over the world, and we had quite a few PA QSAs. And we had some fairly prestigious clients. And so from 2008 to 2010, I was the sole QSA and PA QSA for the world's largest payment processor. So, and I was doing QSA work for them. And then, of course, the Visa requirements came out to make sure payment applications were PCI DSS compliant. And they had a dozen of them, anything from point of sale stuff all the way up through mid-range payment gateways, all the way up to and including payment gateways that ran on IBM and HP mainframes. So I basically assessed and certified every one of their apps. It took quite a while. And that was kind of like going to graduate school. That's where I really learned, what's going on under the covers. When somebody swipes their card or dips the card or whatever, it just seems like magic. But there's a lot behind that curtain. So I worked there for about 7 years, and then the opportunity came about for me to actually move to Coalfire and work on their application validation team. So for 3 years I worked there. We did mostly PA DSS work, but I also got P2PE certified and P2PE PA certified. And so I learned a lot there. And we also did some work for non-payment applications too. So that's where I really learned application security. I spent quite a bit of time there. And from there, I ended up at the Herjavec Group, working on their professional services consulting team, doing GRC stuff. Of course, a lot of PCI. But in the meantime, I actually took some training in operational technology security, IoT and OT stuff. And so we ended up doing some engagements with respect to that. And I also have a background doing, helping to assess and secure power grids, for the NERC SIP stuff. So I did a little bit of that while working there as well. And then last year, we ended up merging with another company, and there was a lot of churn and transition. So I decided I need to find a new home. And that's how I ended up at E Delta Consulting. We're a very small shop, but we have some very large customers. And we have two essential professional services tracks, if you will. One focuses primarily on the CPA side and doing corporate SOC audits and that kind of thing for corporations and banks. And then, of course, we have a GRC side as well. So that's kind of how I ended up here. And it's been a pleasure to work with these three gentlemen. I've learned more from them than they've learned from me. What I think is kind of very cool about what we do is, number one, technically we're all working for each one of us is working for a competitor.
Right.
So for us to raise, above the level of, lay down the hatchet and pass around the peace pipe and do this in terms of trying to help the community, because I forget who said it earlier, but this stuff, when it first came out, it was a bit vague and people had a hard time interpreting it. And it's gotten better. I commend the council, especially in PCI DSS 4.0, they've added a lot more clarification and content, but they also have added some additional complexities, which are going to make what we do, and also the fact that we wrote this book is even more important, because we've always tried to help the community. So I have this saying, it's one of my favorite sayings. The saying is, a rising tide floats all boats. And so I always like to end our sessions, our town hall sessions, telling everyone who attends that, the PCI Dream Team is not just us crusty old farts sitting up here on soap boxes telling you what you should do. It's really a community, and it involves everybody that attends the sessions. It includes everybody who cares about payment card security, which is a lot of people, because everybody cares it. So that's kind of like why I think what we do is pretty cool. And thanks for having us, by the way.
It's my pleasure to have you. And I agree that what you do is very cool and extremely unique, given the competitive nature of everything, like you said. Last but not least, how about the PCI guru over here? Thank you, by the way.
I think I'm the one that was probably doing it a little bit longer than Coop, because I got sucked into it. Originally Visa was doing all their own work, contracting it with Deloitte, but because Deloitte wrote the SIS to begin with. And I remember I got a phone call from a partner when I was at McGladry, and they said, hey, Visa has reached out and they want us to do this review of online transaction processing for Circuit City, the now defunct electronics retailer. And you need to go out and deal with this. And I'll send you over the spreadsheet they sent us. And it was this ginormous Excel spreadsheet that was what was to become the PCI DSS. And I ended up flying out to Richmond, Virginia, and spent weeks out there going through this. At the time, Visa didn't care about retail outlets. They only cared about online transaction processing. So we went through that. Took us 2 weeks just to find the people that knew how their environment worked. Didn't coin the phrase, but I knew it from the start. Coop was the one that always pushed it on everybody, which was follow the data. Any good system analyst that was doing development work knew to follow the data to begin with. which solved the scoping issue. I mean, as long as you can follow the data, you know what the scope is. And so got that done. Took about 6 months to get that first assessment complete and sent over to Visa. And then there were a couple of them that popped up every now and then, and we'd go out and do the work for Visa. And then the training came about in January of 2006 for the QDSP training out in Foster City at Visa Corporate. Went through that, became a QDSP, and then lo and behold, the PCI Council finally got formed. The lawyers all got together and figured out how they could get around the antitrust legislation and still work together. And we all of us that were QDSPs got grandfathered in as QSAs. But we all went through, I remember going through training in Chicago in April of 2007. And went through that and started doing that, turned over the information security practice and started doing the PCI stuff. And I've been doing it ever since. I've probably done, I don't know, maybe 700-800 assessments since then. Been a lot. Seen a lot of environments that just are amazing. Like Coop said, you walk in and you go, wow, what were you thinking? The worst are actually the financial institutions themselves, because they want scope reduction like Walmart and Target get, and you have to explain to them that that's not going to happen. Your business is dealing with this data, and if you don't like that, sell the bank, because that's what you signed up for. And then, of course, yes, as you pointed out, I do write the PCI Guru blog. I'm way behind on that. I owe Ben a blog post for the book. But I also need to write something about this new Neve piece that the council just came out with, that the QSAs are supposed to document findings, which is it's gonna be interesting how that falls out. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I watched some of your sessions from last year when you were just getting into this, and there's a lot of interesting things to follow up on from your previous conversation. But before we get into that, I just want to say that one thing that struck me, it just jumped out, especially coming from a group like this, is this analogy. It's on page 184 where you start off talking about earthquake regulations and why third world countries fall apart, and San Francisco can take an earthquake, but then you compare U.S. security, computer security, the state of computer security is the way you put it, closer to that of third world countries.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, think about it, John. There's the old axiom in security about the fact that a hacker only has to get it right once. InfoSec people on the other side of the chain have to get it right every flipping day, every hour, every minute, because if they mess up, the hacker got in. So, it's
a level playing field. The whole world, John, what you have to understand is when it comes to computer security and hacking, most Americans get their information from sound bites on the evening news from the three major networks, or I should say the old airway networks that are trying to stream us. It's trying to, Hulu for ABC, Peacock for NBC, and Paramount for CBS. They're just trying to get more money out of you by streaming. But the old networks are going to show you what they call evening news, which are nothing but sound bites surrounded by commercials. And so they'll see something on there about computer security. Then they go see a movie. And Hollywood really gets it all wrong when it comes to computers and hacking, and so they think that the U.S. has the best and the brightest. Well, I would love to believe that, but it's not always true. In some cases, the best hacker is in Romania or the Ukraine or Russia or China or North Korea. Or Australia, or New Zealand, or Panama, or Venezuela, or Canada. Yes, Canada, with the nicest people on the planet. There are bad guys up there too. And so the bottom line is, it's a very level playing field. So the sad state of the matter is, look at the colonial mess with the oil. Okay. And what happened there, they had a dial-up modem that somebody had forgot to change the password on. So that was step one. Step two is the younger generation now relies completely. How many young people do you know they install everything on their phones and they just go next, 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 next. They don't know, I think South Park did it right when they showed when you agree to what Apple wanted, that Steve Jobs could sew people butt to mouth and make a human Sentai pad. It's the most ridiculous satire I've seen in my life, but guess what? The point was made. Everybody agrees to every one of the what's written in there. So everybody installs stuff, and what they don't know is they're giving their GPS tags out, their personal data. Look at the mess with TikTok, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And so the problem is you have a whole generation or two, because Generation Z, which are the kiddos that are like 27 and younger, are even more trusting than the millennials, which are like 42 to 27 or something. I'm not getting the gaps right, but these last two generations, unlike us old farts, are very trusting of the technology. And you know why? Because they're natives. They're technology natives. Us old guys are technology immigrants. We immigrated to the technology. And so we tend to be wary of it, and we tend to be more cautious. The problem with that is the whole world has these two latest generations. And these two latest generations are going to get us all in a mess because of a couple of things. They really think AI is great and they want it to do everything. And then at the same time, they don't really take security in the same vein that we do. It's not that they're not serious. And I mean no disrespect to them, because my mother said that my generation was going to destroy the planet. I think this is just a normal, generational thing. And this is the latest cycle. But the scary fact of the matter is, when it comes to computer and internet and network security or any kind of security like this, the whole world is an even play field now. I mean, I can be anywhere on the planet and literally hack you. And the thing of it is, it's not just a euphemism to say that, because the very good hackers have several bots at their ready. So a guy who really knows what he's doing has a whole bunch of systems around the world that he or she can use as attack points. And so you just can't rely on old school security. I know I was an Air Force intelligence and telecom guy during the height of the Cold War, and everything that we did was great back then and absolutely useless now. The only thing that we did well back then was human intelligence, or human as we called it, because we would literally follow these guys. Literally, if I told you how many times I dumpster dived, went through people's garbage, went through their sheds, I broke into garages to find things, all kinds of stuff that we would do in those days. You can't do that anymore. It's pointless. So if I want to hack a bank, let's look at Musk. He's having a big war now with Zuckerberg about Twitter versus Twatter, or whatever the hell Zuckerberg's calling it. So Twatter and Twitter are going to fight. Yeah, there you go. They're going to be fighting everything. So let's say I decide to take on Elon Musk. I never would, but let's say I decided to. If I really wanted to take out Twitter and do nasty, horrible things to him, it's easy. It's just a question of how deep do you want to bury it so that it gets discovered. And God forbid that a state wants you. If the Soviet Union was still in existence and Putin had the control that he wishes he had. Can you imagine? And so, as we've cycled through, the old Cold War ended, we don't have the so-called Soviet Union, but we still have guys and gals around the world with these like state-sponsored spy groups and this and that. You're never going to stop those guys. If the North Korean spies and hackers decide they're going to go after you, they're going to get you. You're going to be like Colonial Pipeline. You're going to have a dial-up modem somewhere, and you didn't change the password. And boy, howdy, are they going to find it? And then everything's even. So it doesn't matter what country you're in. I work for a company called Trusted Sec, and I have to tell you, not to be competitive or anything like that, I think we have some of the most brilliant minds in this country in cybersecurity working for this company. Our founder, Dave Kennedy, very well-known gentleman, former Marine, former NSA guy. These folks I work with, I learn something every day from these young people. They're downright geniuses, but you know what they'll all tell you? You can still get caught. You can still, no matter what, has been done to be preventative and to try to, to be taking a proactive outlook to security. There's always something. And Jeff hit it right on the head. The hacker only has to find that something once. And the poor cyber guys, they're spending their whole life trying to keep that one thing from happening. And we're outnumbered. Anybody that's in this field, we are outnumbered, I don't know, 1,000 to 1, probably more so. So I'll stop yakking, but
I think one part.
Go ahead, Ben.
I think, one part also is, for the reasons like, the reason people don't rob banks anymore is because, Bonnie and Clyde, it was a huge issue. And so law enforcement figured out a way to take the, economic incentives out of it, meaning banks don't now have that much cash. So if someone does, rob a bank, maybe you'll get $10,000 or so. But with cybercrime, the economic incentives are massive. And, the average wage in a third world country might be $2,000 a year. And maybe a doctor is going to make $12,000 a year. But if you want to be go into cybercrime, you can make, the sky's the limit. And there's just massive, economic incentives to attack the West, both for, economic, political, and other reasons. But the economics are so massive. It's just a target both at the, the individual level. I mean, with the IRS and the Amazon and the Medicare scams, all the way up to, sophisticated. Nation states. And clearly, the U.S. employs, a lot of hackers to attack our adversaries, as do Russia, North Korea, and, pretty much, the other 198 countries. Maybe the Maldives doesn't, and, Fiji doesn't, but, they're all attacking each other. And, but the key is, focus on those core information security, fundamentals. And it's those that low-hanging fruit, the modem, the unpatched server. And it's not just that it's, unpatched from a month ago, unpatched from, 36 months ago. But yeah, I said is that it's, we've got, thousands of years of securing physical security. And to a degree, if you took a master combination lock, that's 30 years old, it could still work to, secure your locker at the gym or so. But, within the digital world, the 6 months, a year is, things are obsolete. And, that is a huge challenge also, is that the timeframes are so, so compressed. And yeah, you could use a basic 30-year-old master padlock for, low security issues.
Oh,
but, that analogy simply won't work.
Don't even go there, Ben. I have a set of keys that I got working at a gas station when I was in high school that will open just about every gas pump in the nation.
Okay.
Other than Costco and a couple other clients where I pointed out to them that you need to get them changed. And those keys are 50, 55 years old,
Okay.
and they still work.
Okay. Make sure you lock your door tonight. Well,
It's funny. I remember when Jeff told me about that. I was actually working for one of the large fuel pump manufacturers and doing PA DSS work on their applications, and he was telling me about his keys, and I was like, oh Lord. And he was right. It's the same bloody key. And then this is why when we work with convenience stores and fuel merchants, we keep telling them to put those little seals, the little tape that shows it hasn't been opened, but that's not working well, as everyone knows. So it's those can be foiled so easily. But that's a great analogy, Ben. When talking about a bank, it's true. Robbing a bank nowadays is really a small time crime. Think about what a credit card guy, a carder, as we call them, a good carder sitting in wherever, some coffee shop, gets a big, huge dump, and they actually call them that. They get a big dump of card data from somebody's gateway, and then they sell it. It used to be this site called Riskator, and now there's a whole bunch of them. And thank God for Brian Krebs, because he always goes out there and digs into that. I love what he does. He will find anybody who is selling card data or privacy data. Good old Brian Krebs will find it, but the poor guy has suffered the price for that. Some of the hackers sent some cocaine or heroin to his house, and then they swatted him, and his family was in danger. And so, this is serious stuff. These carders, they're making millions of dollars. They swatted him. And so, sometimes even being in cybersecurity can be just as dangerous as working for the FBI or any of the other intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies. So, but it is very much an even field, John. There is no advantage here, except maybe we have more money to buy better equipment, but even that's not always true, and that's a real thin line. I don't want to rely on that.
Well, and actually there was an article 3 weeks ago maybe, in the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, maybe it was in the Sydney paper. Anyway, they were talking about the fact that when Putin shut down the firewalls in Russia, all of his hackers left the country because he was cutting off their way of doing business. And now he's all irritated because he was skimming their profits. And now he has no leverage over them, and they're sitting in the old Eastern Europe, Germany, Poland, wherever, still up to their no good, but they don't have to share any money with him anymore. And so he's really kind of irritated with that fact that he's lost a revenue stream, a very lucrative revenue stream.
Yeah, like the Kaspersky thing. Boy, that talk about plugging into that story. The Kaspersky guys for years.
Yeah,
they were right in Moscow. When I was in Moscow, I remember seeing their offices there, and back in the good old days when it was still the Cold War, but we didn't talk about it. But it's funny, isn't it? How the same thing with his oligarchs, Putin, people forget Putin's just a gangster. It's just money to him. Everything is money. So the reason he loved propping up the oligarchs is he got his cut.
Yep.
You've been listening to the Truvantis Risk Radar.